The Maya are a highly advanced, yet highly superstitious civilization. They construct soaring feats of architecture that anchor their cities. One of these cities stands out from all the rest, Chichen Itza.
Probably the most stunning of all these ancient structures.
For centuries, people thought they knew the secrets of Chichén Itzá. But new scans under its massive pyramid revealed a hollow space no one ever expected. A hidden chamber sealed off for more than 1,000 years. Joe Rogan has talked about how baffling this place is, and discoveries like this only prove him right. What's really down there could answer questions we've been asking for countless centuries. So let's see what Joe Rogan has to say and uncover the other mysteries still hiding inside Chichén Itzá, the hidden chamber. Archaeologists were out on the plaza of Chichén Itzá, setting up their equipment right in front of El Castillo, the Big Pyramid, a place Joe Rogan said blew his mind. They had ground-penetrating radar, electrical resistivity meters, and seismic sensors, all the kind of gear that lets you look inside stone without tearing anything apart. At first, the scans were routine, just more data for the archives. But then one of the machines gave back an echo that didn't fit. Instead of solid limestone, it showed a hollow space, like a hidden room sealed off deep inside. They ran the test again, thinking it was an error, but the same reading popped up. That was the moment it hit them. Beneath one of the most famous pyramids in the world was a chamber nobody had stepped into for over 1,000 years. Joe Rogan has talked about walking here and asking himself how the Maya pulled this off and what their culture was really like. This kind of discovery only makes those questions louder. A secret chamber like that fits perfectly at Chichen Itza because so much of this city's story runs underground. Not long ago, archaeologists reopened a sealed sanctuary called Balamku, which means Cave of the Jaguar God. What they found was a maze of tunnels filled with ritual objects that had been sitting untouched for about 1,000 years. National Geographic covered the story and stressed that the team moved very slowly, leaving everything exactly in place because the cave was like a frozen moment in time. It wasn't robbed, it wasn't disturbed, it was a real time capsule of worship. The cave itself wasn't new. Local farmers showed the entrance to officials back in 1966. An archaeologist named Victor Segovia Pinto inspected it, noted there were many objects inside, and then ordered the farmers to seal it. After that, it stayed closed for decades, and the report got lost in the paperwork. In 2018, Guillermo de Anda, an underwater archaeologist working with the Great Maya Aquifer Project, brought a team back. They crawled for long stretches on their stomachs just to reach the first chambers. When their lights finally lit up the ledges, they saw exactly what they hoped for. Offerings left the way Maya people had placed them 1,000 years earlier. Inside, the team documented hundreds of items. There were incense burners, vases, censers darkened with soot, plates, seeds, shells, jade, food traces, and bones. Everything was grouped into clusters that made sense as separate offerings. INA, Mexico's Institute of History and Archaeology, along with local reports, put the number at more than 200 objects. They said the cave had at least 7 offering areas in incredible condition because it had been sealed for so long. What mattered was not just the count, but the details. Burn marks showed where resin was lit. Residues still clung to bowls. Seeds and food remains were right where people had left them. It was not a staged collection. It was the real thing, locked in place. One feature jumped out fast. Many of the incense burners showed the goggle-eyed face of Tlaloc, the rain god from central Mexico. Seeing that god deep in a Maya cave said a lot. Chichén Itzá blended local traditions with ideas and styles from far away. The same mix shows up above ground in warrior columns and serpent carvings, and here it was again underground in the offerings. The team treated Balamku like a living lab, not a treasure hunt. First, they focused on mapping. They built a three-dimensional model of the chambers and digitally recorded everything. That way, they could study how each item was placed relative to the others. They left everything in place unless moving it was necessary. This method lets specialists test for things like plant remains, food residues, and traces of resin to answer questions. What exactly was burned? When were these offerings made? Were they linked to times of drought or seasonal cycles? The big idea was to learn from the layout of the cave as much as from the objects themselves. Even entering the cave was done with care. Before stepping in, the team performed a purification ritual out of respect for tradition. Then they crawled on elbows and knees through narrow passages. Once in the main areas, they avoided lifting items unless there was no other choice. They recorded 7 offering areas and compared them to another famous ritual cave nearby, Balamku Cave. That cave held only about 70 items. By contrast, Balamku was larger, harder to get to, and filled with many more offerings spread across its chambers. Balamku lies about 1 3/4 miles east of El Castillo. That distance matters because it shows how the sanctuary is connected to the city's core while still being part of the larger sacred landscape of caves and water-filled sinkholes called cenotes that cover northern Yucatan. Reports noted that the cave lay 70 to 80 feet below ground. Inside, the feel matched that depth perfectly. Wet limestone, hanging stalactites, low ceilings, and cool, still air. Caves were sacred because the Maya believed they were doors to the underworld. They were places where you asked for rain, gave thanks for harvests, or pleaded for help during hard times. Experts explained during the study that caves shaped how Maya cities were built and organized. The offerings at Balamku fit this belief system perfectly. Resin burned to create smoke. Food and seeds matched cycles of need and gratitude. Shells were carried from the coast, showing people brought goods from far away, just for rituals. Dating the cave matters too. The ceramics and other evidence show it was used heavily during the late to terminal classic period, when Chichén Itzá was growing strong. Early analysis points to use during the 8th to 10th centuries AD. This was also the time when droughts may have hit the lowlands hard. Sealed offerings with organic material are rare, and here they could give real answers about climate changes and how the city responded when crops failed and water ran low. Joe Rogan has pointed out that diseases wiped out most of the native population later on, but this cave shows that drought and famine were also massive threats. Balamku also stands out compared to older digs. In the 1950s, at Balamku Cave, excavators took objects out, cleaned them, and put them back. Doing that erased the smallest traces, like soot or seed husks. At Balamku, the team did the opposite. They left items in place, built digital models, and only moved them when science required it. Archaeologists called it a second chance because it is so rare to find a ritual cave sealed and untouched. This cave also connects to a bigger project. Reopening Balamku was part of the work to understand the Great Maya Aquifer, the massive water system under Yucatan. Guillermo de Anda has spent years diving into cenotes and mapping how water, caves, and cities connect. Balamku gave him and his team a land-based link to that system. It showed a cave full of offerings tied directly to the same rock and water network that fed the cenotes around Chichén Itzá. When you step back, the whole city becomes clearer. Public life took place in the open, at the Temple of the Warriors, on the steps of El Castillo, and in the massive ball court that UNESCO calls a masterpiece. But the private, sacred side, the prayers, fears, and thanks, happened in caves like Balamku. Both worlds worked together. A public event in the plaza might be matched by a quiet deposit in a cave. The stone carvings and monuments above told the political story. The soot, shells, and seeds below told the spiritual one. The variety of objects inside Balamku keeps teaching new lessons. The sensors with faces and flanges show ties to central Mexico. Plates and bowls still hold residues that labs can test for food and resins. Shells can be traced to the coasts, proving trade networks. Jade chips point to status or deliberate breaking. Animal bones, often from species linked to water or earth, add yet another piece to the puzzle. Each artifact is a clue, and together they map out how ceremonies worked. What was lit first, what was left in which corner, and how often rituals were repeated. The cave also fills a gap. For decades, most people only heard about the sacred cenote and thought offerings were all tied to that one spot. But Balamku showed that rituals happened in many underground chambers across the city's limestone landscape. When the media covered the cave in 2019, they stressed that this discovery could rewrite the history of Chichen Itza. It gave sealed, datable, testable proof from the very centuries when the city became powerful. Exploring the cave wasn't easy. Archaeologists spent hours crawling, steering around stalactites, and working in still air so quiet they could hear water dripping. They brought no heavy gear, only lights, cameras, mapping tools, and patience. And Balamku fits into a wave of new science. Recent genetic studies of a mass burial near the sacred cenote found that all the remains were boys, and some were close relatives, even identical twins. That kind of detail is the sort of thing Joe Rogan says makes the past feel real. Not just ruins, but actual families caught up in rituals. What's wild is the surprises don't stop underground. Even the big pyramid right in the plaza hides secrets within its stone walls. Secrets of El Castillo. El Castillo is the rock star of Chichen Itza. The second you see it, you get why people travel across the world to stand in front of it. The pyramid has 4 staircases, one on each side, and every side lines up perfectly, with north, south, east, and west. Each staircase has 91 steps. Add the platform on top, and you've got 365 steps. That number wasn't random. That's the same number as the days in a year. The Maya weren't just stacking rocks. They were carving their calendar into stone. But El Castillo doesn't stop at being a giant calendar. Twice a year, during the spring and fall equinox, it turns into a giant shadow show. Late in the afternoon, as the sun drops, shadows appear on the north staircase. They don't just fall randomly, they fall in the shape of triangles. As the light shifts, those triangles connect and link up with the big carved snake heads at the bottom. Suddenly, it looks like a massive serpent is slithering down the steps. People call it the descent of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent. It only lasts a few minutes, but trust me, nobody forgets it. No batteries, no projectors, just sunlight and smart design. And that's not all. El Castillo has a sound trick too. Stand at the bottom, clap your hands, and the echo comes back sounding like a bird chirping. And not just any bird. The Quetzal, which was sacred in Mesoamerica. The steps act like an acoustic filter, twisting the echo into that chirp. Scientists tested it, modeled it, and proved it. The Maya pulled off an ancient sound effect without speakers or amplifiers. Now, let's go inside, because that's where things get wild. Back in the 1930s, archaeologists crawled into the pyramid and found another pyramid hidden inside. The inner pyramid had 9 platforms and 1 staircase leading up to a tiny shrine. Inside that shrine, they found a red jaguar throne with jade inlays and a Chak-Mul statue. The jaguar throne wasn't just furniture. It was painted bright red with green jade spots and jade eyes. The Chak-Mul is that famous reclining figure holding a bowl on its stomach, probably for offerings. Oh, and there were human remains inside too. That means the Maya didn't just build one pyramid. They built a new one over the old one, sealing up the earlier shrine with all its sacred stuff still in place. And it doesn't stop there. In 2016, researchers from UNAM scanned the pyramid again with fancy electrical imaging. Turns out, there's an even older pyramid inside. That makes 3 pyramids stacked together like Russian nesting dolls. The smallest one probably dates from about the year 550 to 800. The middle one came after that, and the outer one we see today was likely finished around 900 to 1100. The method they used is called electrical resistivity tomography, or ERT-3D, which sounds complicated but just means they scanned the ground with electrodes to map what's inside. The results made headlines because they proved once and for all that the pyramid wasn't built in one go. It was upgraded in stages, each time covering up the old version. Imagine remodeling your house 3 times, but instead of tearing the old stuff down, you just build new walls around it. That's El Castillo. And here's where it gets crazier. Beneath the pyramid, the ground isn't solid. The same UNAM team ran 3-dimensional scans and found a massive water-filled cavity directly underneath. Basically, a natural cenote sits right below El Castillo. It's not some man-made basement, it's a natural underground pool inside the limestone. That fits perfectly with the Maya obsession with water, caves, and cenotes as sacred places. And yes, the scientists triple-checked this. They published models, data, and even error rates. This isn't guesswork, it's proven science. The pyramid is literally standing on a watery underworld. Walk around the pyramid, and you'll notice the snake theme everywhere. The north staircase has those massive carved snake heads at the bottom. The stair rails are carved into serpent forms too. The whole pyramid faces the cardinal directions, with the north side pointing straight toward the sacred cenote, which was basically their holy water source. Guides love to say the pyramid is a giant calendar, and it kind of is. 91 steps per side plus the top equals 365, and 9 terraces split by the 4 staircases make 18 faces, just like the 18 months in the Maya solar year. Whether you buy the calendar theory or not, the design clearly ties time, space, and ritual together. Now, here's the part most tourists don't know. For years, people could climb the pyramid and even go inside. But in 2006, a tourist tragically fell to their death. The authorities closed access. Since then, no more climbing and no more crawling inside for the public. Every once in a while, someone breaks the rules and sneaks up the stairs, only to get caught on video, dragged down, and slapped with a fine. So today, you can only walk around the pyramid. That's why most people don't realize there's a red jaguar throne and a Chak-Mul still sealed inside. The pyramid we see today looks so sharp thanks to restorations in the 1920s and 30s. Back then, the Mexican government cleaned it up, while the Carnegie Institution from the US worked on nearby buildings like the Temple of the Warriors and the Caracol Observatory. Before that, travelers like John Lloyd Stevens and Frederick Catherwood had sketched the pyramid when it was buried in jungle brush. The restoration gave El Castillo its modern look and even made the equinox serpent effect easier to watch from the plaza. But honestly, The inner finds are the real jaw-dropper. That red jaguar throne, painted and decorated with jade and shell, has been tested with non-invasive tools like portable XRF, which confirmed its makeup without damaging it. Same with the Chakmul statue. These finds show the wealth and care that went into the earlier temple. The pyramid's size is another point people always ask about. It has 9 terraces, rises about 78 feet to the top platform, and then the temple adds another 20 feet or so. Different sources measure slightly different numbers, but everyone agrees it's medium tall for a Maya pyramid. Not the tallest ever built, but definitely the most famous. Why? Because of how it ties everything together. Sky, time, sound, myth, and ritual. It's like the perfect all-in-one design. And remember, El Castillo isn't standing there alone. It's part of a whole cluster of mind-blowing buildings. UNESCO calls the North Group, which includes El Castillo, the Great Ball Court, and the Temple of the Warriors, a set of masterpieces. And here's a fun fact. The pyramid wasn't always plain gray stone. Back in the day, it was painted. Across Mesoamerica, temples were covered in bright stucco and colors, and Chichen Itza was no exception. El Castillo probably glowed with red, green, and blue. Time and weather stripped that paint away, leaving it stone-colored. But archaeologists are sure it once looked like a giant, colorful sculpture. And if you think El Castillo is cool, let's talk about its little sibling, El Osario, also known as the High Priest's Grave. At first glance, it looks like a smaller version of El Castillo. But this one has a crazy twist. At the top, there's a square shaft that drops straight down through the pyramid into a natural cave. Early explorers found 7 tombs down there with offerings like jade, shell, copper, and crystal. This wasn't just a random hole. It was a pyramid built on top of a real cave used for burials. The design couldn't be clearer. Temple above, underworld below. El Osario also helped scientists test their scans. When the UNAM team discovered the water-filled cavity under El Castillo, they used El Osario as a check. Since the natural cave under El Osario has been known since the 1800s, scanning it confirmed their method worked. Sure enough, the scans lit up the cave exactly where expected, proving their system was accurate. Comparing the 2 pyramids shows how the Maya liked to play with themes. El Osario is blunt, a shaft leading down into tombs in a cave. El Castillo does it with style, serpent shadows, sound tricks, and nested temples. Both connect the sky, the ground, and the underworld. Both prove the Maya were master planners. And both show why Chichen Itza is unforgettable. The people here built monuments that are still put on show 1,000 years later. And the coolest part? You can still stand there today, clap your hands, and hear a pyramid turn your sound into a sacred bird call. That's ancient engineering flexing right in front of you. The pyramid's all about time and the sky. But just a few steps away, things get way darker. The Great Ball Court and Warrior Temple of Chichen Itza. The Great Ball Court at Chichen Itza is the kind of thing that smacks you in the face the second you see it. It is massive. This is the biggest ball court the Maya ever built, and it is still the best preserved one we know about today. There are more than a dozen smaller courts scattered around the city, but this one was the showpiece. It sits to the northwest of El Castillo, and it is shaped like a giant capital letter I. Long stone walls run down the sides, with temples sitting at each end. Now, when it comes to size, people love to argue because it depends on what you measure. But 2 numbers matter. If you measure the whole thing, edge to edge, this court stretches about 550 feet long and 230 feet wide. The actual playing alley, the part where the ball game really happened, runs about 390 feet long and 99 feet wide. Let's put that in perspective. That is longer than a football field and almost as wide. And the walls are not short. They rise up smooth and tall, and halfway down each wall sits a stone ring mounted high overhead. Those rings are carved with feathered serpents, which already tells you this game was more than a pastime. It was tied into the whole feathered serpent cult that ran through the city. Then there are the carvings. And these are not gentle little decorations. They are graphic. Right in the middle panels, you see two full teams of 7 players lined up facing each other in their protective gear. And in one scene, a player is kneeling, his head chopped clean off, with streams pouring from his neck that turn into snakes. Another player holds the knife and the severed head. It is brutal, but it makes the point crystal clear. This ball game was not just for fun. It was tied to sacrifice, blood, and renewal. Mexican archaeologists say the serpent rings acted like gates to the underworld. That fits the whole mood of the place. So, if you thought this was some casual pickup game, think again. This was ritual theater, religion, and politics all rolled together. And here's a crowd favorite. The sound in the ball court is crazy. If you stand at one end and whisper, someone at the far end can hear you perfectly. Tour guides love showing this off. Scientists tested it, and sure enough, the effect is real. The parallel stone walls act like a giant speaker system, bouncing sound back and forth instead of letting it fade out. There is even a flutter echo between the two long walls. The Acoustical Society of America studied it and proved you can talk across hundreds of feet without yelling. When you are standing there, it honestly feels like the building itself is alive and helping carry voices. Now, about those temples at the ends. On the north side sits the larger one, often called the Temple of the Bearded Man. The nickname comes from a carving of a figure with, you guessed it, a beard. Inside, there are more carvings showing rows of figures and priestly scenes, tying the ball game directly to the feathered serpent god Kukulkan. On the south end is a smaller, damaged temple. It is not as impressive, but it was part of the setup. Guides will tell you that the elites, the rulers, and VIPs of the city would sit in these temples and watch the game from above. That matches what we know from other ball courts, too. And then there is the Temple of the Jaguars on the east side. This one has 2 levels. The upper temple sits up high, looking straight out over the ball court. Its entrance is framed by 2 giant feathered serpent columns. Inside, it once had painted murals that showed sea battles, warriors, and ships. The murals have faded, but an artist named Adela Breton copied them over 100 years ago, so scholars can still study the details today. Down at ground level is the lower Jaguar Temple, which holds a jaguar throne inside. Together, these temples told anyone watching that the ball court was not just a sports venue. It was wrapped in art, religion, and power. One reason this court looks so straight and clean compared to others is the building style at Chichén Itzá during that time. The city was mixing traditional Maya styles with Toltec influence, and the result leaned heavily into military and serpent imagery. Archaeology magazines in Mexico often say this is the largest ball court in the Maya world and the flagship among the 13 courts at the site. Now, let's slide over to the Temple of the Warriors because this is where Chichén Itzá keeps flexing. You cannot miss it. It is a stepped pyramid with a wide stairway leading to a temple on top, and around its base spread huge colonnades. People call it the Group of 1,000 Columns. No, there are not literally 1,000, but there are hundreds, and it sure feels endless. when you are walking among them. Many of those columns are carved with warriors and standard-bearers, so it looks like an army turned into stone. Back in 1931, a team from the Carnegie Institution, Earl Morris, John Charlot, and Anne Axtell Morris, documented this temple in detail. They mapped out every doorway, room, altar, and sanctuary. They described the serpent columns at the entrance, which are classic Chichén Itzá. Feathered snakes rise up as supports, tying the building to Kukulkan just like the ball court and El Castillo do. On the top platform sits a Chacmul statue. This is a reclining figure with a bowl on its stomach, which would have held offerings. Again, the message repeats: serpent imagery, warrior carvings, and a Chacmul catching gifts. And the carvings here pull no punches either. On the walls and columns, you see warriors marching in profile with spears and shields. You see eagles and jaguars grabbing and eating human hearts. That image is not subtle, and it shows up on other platforms nearby too, like the platform of eagles and jaguars. It was a clear statement about war, sacrifice, and power. Some of the symbols here are also tied to Venus, which was a big deal for marking warfare and rulership. The Temple of the Warriors is not just one block of stone. Beneath it is an older building often called the Temple of the Chacmul. Early excavations found another Chacmul there. Researchers even compare this one with the Chacmul statue hidden inside El Castillo's inner pyramid, and another one discovered near the skull rack platform. Basically, this type of statue was central to rituals across the whole plaza. The colonnades spreading out from the pyramid are just as important as the temple itself. On the west and north sides, you get long rows of columns that once supported roofs. Some are round, some are square, and the square ones are decorated with carvings of armed figures. Back in the day, these were covered in stucco and painted in bright reds, greens, and blues. Walking through them would have felt like moving through a massive covered hall filled with color and images of soldiers. These spaces could have been used for markets, meetings, or rituals. Even without exact labels, the scale and decoration show that this was a space for crowds and ceremony. The temple dates to the 10th and 11th centuries, which is the same period when the outer shell of El Castillo was finished. That means this whole plaza, the pyramid, the ball court, and the warrior's temple, was booming at the same time. When you compare the Great Ball Court and the Temple of the Warriors, the balance becomes obvious. The ball court was loud, public, and dramatic. The sound carried down the alley. The carvings showed sacrifice, and the serpent rings symbolized underworld gates. The Temple of the Warriors, on the other hand, was more enclosed. Its roofed halls and carved columns created a controlled space for elites and rituals, while the Chacmul up top received offerings. One was designed for spectacle, the other for more private ceremonies. But both hammered in the same theme with serpent imagery and warrior symbolism tied to Kukulkan. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.